The German rearmament campaign had started in 1933, shortly after Hitler's rise to power, ignoring the Treaty of Versailles from 1919, and starting to design and build tanks in preparation of what was to become the Second World War. Initial tank design had nothing to do with their first attempt from the previous war, such as the A7V, but were rather focused on mobility and better firepower than their World War I counterparts. Skipping ahead of the lesser powerful tanks of the Third Reich, we arrive at our top 5 tanks of the Wehrmacht that left their mark on history. If you're new to our channel, thank you so much for watching. We at Smart Fusion are posting weekly documentaries on diverse interesting topics like the ones you can check up here. Please leave a like or a comment if you want, as it would help our community a great deal to expand and us to make more interesting videos for you. Thank you. At number 5, we have the Panzer IV, commonly known as the Panzer IV, that was a German medium tank developed in the late 1930s by Krupp and used extensively during the Second World War. The Panzer IV was the most numerous German tank and the second most numerous German armor fighting vehicle of the Second World War, with some 8,500 of them being built. The Panzer IV chassis was used as the base for many other fighting vehicles, including the Sturmgeschütz IV assault gun and the Jagdpanzer Type 4 tank destroyer, and a few other self-propelled guns and anti-aircraft gun batteries. The Panzer IV saw service in all combat theaters involving Germany and was the only German tank to remain in continuous production throughout the war. The Panzer IV was originally designed for infantry support, while the similar Panzer III would fight armor fighting vehicles. However, as the Germans faced the formidable T-34, the Panzer Type 4 had more development potential with a larger turret ring to mount more powerful guns and took over the anti-tank role. As a result, the Panzer IV received various upgrades and design modifications intended to counter new threats, thus extending its service life. Generally speaking, these upgrades involved increasing the Panzer IV's armor protection or upgrading its weapons, although during the last months of the war, with Germany's pressing need for rapid replacement of losses, design changes also included simplification to speed up the manufacturing process. The Sturmgeschütz III or Stuk III assault gun was Germany's most produced, fully tracked armor fighting vehicle during the war, and the second most produced German armored combat vehicle of any type after the half-track, with a total number of 10,086 units being built. This tank was built on a slightly modified Panzer III chassis, replacing the turret with an armored fixed superstructure that could mount a more powerful gun. The Stuk III was initially intended as a mobile assault gun for direct fire support for infantry, but then it was continually modified and, much like the later Jagdpanzer vehicles, was employed as a tank destroyer. The Sturmgeschütz III series of vehicles was proven to be very successful and served on all the fronts from Russia to North Africa and from Western Europe to Italy as an assault gun and tank destroyer. The role that they had taken on as a tank destroyer was perfect for them because of their low silhouettes, making the Stuk III very easy to camouflage and be hidden, and were very difficult targets to destroy. The Stuk assault guns were very cost-effective compared to the heavier German tanks such as the Tiger I and the Panther, although as an anti-tank gun they were very best used defensively as they lacked a traversable turret and its generally thin armor was a severe disadvantage in an attack role. As the situation for German military deteriorated later on in the war, more Stuk IIIs were built in tanks, particularly due to the ease of production. While not the most powerful or well-armored tank of the war, the Stuk III tanks were responsible for an estimated 20,000 Allied tank kills just in 1944 alone, this being a devastating record that made its terror on the battlefield. The Panther is a German medium tank deployed during the war on the eastern and western fronts in Europe from mid-1943 to the war's end in 1945. The Panther tank was intended to counter the Soviet T-34 and to replace the Panzer III and the Panzer IV. Nevertheless, it served alongside the Panzer IV and the heavier Tiger I until the end of the war. It is considered to be one of the best tanks of World War II for its excellent firepower and protection, although its reliability was less than impressive. Still, some 6,000 units were produced until the end of the war. The Panther was a compromise. While having essentially the same Maybach V12 petrol engine that developed 690 horsepower as the Tiger I, it had more effective frontal hull armor, better gun penetration, was lighter and faster, and could traverse rough terrain better than the Tiger I. There was a trade-off though, and this trade-off was that it had weaker side armor which made it more vulnerable to flanking fire. The Panther proved to be effective in open country and long-range engagements, but did not provide enough high-explosive firepower against infantry. The Panther was far cheaper to produce than the Tiger I and only slightly more expensive than the Panzer IV, with key elements of the Panther design such as its armor, transmission, and final drive being simplified to improve production rates and to address the raw material shortages. The Panther's design, although described by some to be over-engineered, was rushed into combat at the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943, despite numerous unresolved technical problems leading to high losses due to mechanical failure. Most of these design flaws were, however, rectified by late 1943 and early 1944, though the bombing of the production plants, increasing shortages in high-quality alloys for critical components, as well as shortages of fuel and training space and the declining quality of the crew all impacted the tank's effectiveness. Though officially it is classified as a medium tank, its weight is more that of a heavy tank since it weighs 44.8 tons and puts it roughly in the same category as the American M26 Pershing at 41.7 tons or the British Churchill at 40.7 tons. And the Soviet IS-2, which weighed 46 tons, all of these being heavy tanks. The tank had a very high power-to-weight ratio, making it highly mobile regardless of its tonnage, but its weight still caused logistical problems such as inability to cross certain types of bridges. The Tiger I was the most feared tank of the early phases of World War II. Since it was so ahead of its time, it influenced tank designs for decades to come. Entering the battlefield in 1942, no tank on the Allied side could ever hope to penetrate the Tiger's incredible thick armor or stand a chance against its powerful 88mm cannon. It did have its weak spots though, namely in the rear, but a surprising amount of maneuverability and speed made the Tiger I a nearly impossible foe to fight at the same time, dominating everything that it encountered unless it's rushed by waves of countless enemy tanks. Although that would change in the years to come as Allied tank design adapted to take down these monsters. While the Tiger I had been called an outstanding design for its time, it's also been called over-engineered, using some expensive materials and labor-intensive production methods. The tank was also prone to certain types of track failures and breakdowns and was limited in range by its high fuel consumption. It was difficult to transport and vulnerable to immobilization when either mud, ice, and snow froze between its overlapping and interleaved track assist wheels, often jamming them solid. This was a problem on the Eastern Front in the muddy Rasputitsa season and during periods of extreme cold. Some 1,347 total units were made, and until today, only 7 Tiger tanks survive in museums and private collections around the world. The most famous of which is the Tiger numbered 131 at UK's Tank Museum, being the only example that is fully restored to running order. While the IS-2 demolished the Tiger I, the incoming beasts that the Soviets feared would take the shape as the far superior Tiger II, also known as the King Tiger. Upgrading just about every aspect of the already monstrous Tiger I, the newly Tiger II received more advanced sloped armor, a bigger and more powerful cannon, as well as a more powerful engine. Fixing and improving on the flaws of the Tiger I resulted in the most feared tank of the war, although its late introduction during the final year of World War II limited its combat success. Still, ace tank commanders like Kurt Knispel proved the Tiger's true power, scoring 168 kills and becoming the highest scoring tank commander of all time behind the controls of this absolute monster of a machine. The Tiger II was issued to heavy tank battalions of the Army and the Waffen-SS. It was first used in combat by 503 Heavy Panzer Battalion during the Allied invasion of Normandy on 11 of July 1944, and on the Eastern Front, for the first unit to be outfitted with the Tiger II was the 501 Heavy Panzer Battalion, which by 1st of September 1944 listed 25 Tiger IIs operational. The heavy armor and powerful long-range gun gave the Tiger II an advantage against all opposing Western Allies and Soviet tanks attempting to engage it head-on. This was especially true on the Western Front, where until the arrival of a few M26 Pershings in 1945 and a few M4A3E2 Sherman jumbos that were scattered around Europe after D-Day, as well as a few late Churchill models, neither the British nor the US forces brought heavy tanks into service. As a result of its thick frontal armor, flanking maneuvers were most often used against the Tiger II to attempt a shot at the thinner side and rear armor, giving it a tactical advantage to the Tiger II in most engagements. Moreover, the main armament of the Tiger II was capable of knocking out any Allied tanks frontally at range exceeding 2.5 kilometers, well beyond the effective range of Allied tanks. Although a small number of tanks were ever built, with 482 done by the end of the war, it was still more than just a formidable opponent. This concludes our video for today with our pick of the top 5 Nazi tanks of the war, but please leave your comment down below with your choice of the best German tanks of the era. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ring that bell, and be a part of our growing community. Thank you. See you guys in the next one.